Every great character has a fatal flaw. The problem is, most of us think ours belongs to someone else. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Call Cut with Angélique. Today, we're calling cut on one of the hardest flaws to recognize in ourselves and one of the easiest to spot in everyone else: arrogance. You see, arrogance doesn't always look the way we think it does. Sometimes it comes in the form of entitlement, sometimes it's bossiness, superiority, or the undying need to be right. And often underneath all of that bravado is something surprisingly fragile: the fear that maybe we are not enough. So today we're going to take arrogance apart, unpack it, look at it, and see what might actually be driving it, how it can sabotage our relationships and our success, and most importantly, how we can call cut when we recognize it in ourselves. So let's get right down into it and let's go into the psychology of what arrogance actually is. And I want to start by saying that confidence and arrogance are not synonymous, although many people conflate the two. A confidence isn't something that requires a hierarchy. And what I mean by that is I can believe I'm talented without having to believe you're less talented. I can be confident that I'm intelligent without needing you to feel stupid. And I can lead without dominating you. Arrogance introduces an actual hierarchy, right? I know better. I deserve more. My time matters more. You should listen to me. The rules are for everyone else. And this is where the inferiority complex comes in. Now, psychologist Alfred Adler famously wrote about feelings of inferiority and the ways many people overcompensate for them. The person who secretly experiences inadequacy can construct an exaggerated sense of superiority around it. And that's what we are getting to. And this is fascinating because when we look at this through a compassionate lens, we see that arrogance isn't actually the wound, it's the armor. And the armor can be incredibly convincing. So let's take a quick look at how arrogance disguises itself, because most people won't recognize arrogance in themselves. As a matter of fact, they'll say, "No, I'm just confident," or "No, I feel good about myself." And this is where we have to break down what is true confidence and how arrogance can come out so that we can see it. We can hold up a mirror to it and say, oh, interesting. Because the narrative around the two is very, very different, right? Arrogance can sound like, I shouldn't have to explain myself. They should know who I am. I already know that. Just do what I said. Why should I apologize? They're lucky I'm even doing this. Okay. These are arrogant phrases. And somebody might say, well, no, it's confidence because I know, I have all of this confidence in my work and I know my worth. Well, people who know their worth don't have to consistently prove it to everybody. And people who know their worth don't really need to tear other people down to take a spotlight or to snuff someone else's light. People who know their worth can operate fully embodied in their light. And that is a major distinction between arrogance and confidence. Because underneath those statements, I'm usually right, I'm more educated, I'm smarter, whatever it is, there is something much less powerful, a narrative that's running underneath those statements. And that is, what happens if I'm wrong? What happens if they don't think I'm important? What happens if somebody knows more than I do? And here's the big one. What happens if I'm ordinary? And that's where I think this is where we're really going to get into the weeds here. People have such a problem with being ordinary. We live in a world that celebrates the extraordinary. But oftentimes, if you take a look at the performative extraordinary, it's just a mask. And these masks have created an illusion. And the illusion has created this really competitive society. And when we stop and look, we have to ask ourselves, can we reach the success we want to reach if we keep wearing these masks and we keep using these armors like arrogance, instead of stripping all of that away and getting down to the nitty gritty, figuring out where the wound is, what the armor is that's covering the wound, and then seeking to really heal that wound so we can replace arrogance with confidence. Because you see, arrogance has a lot of other nasty little habits that come along with it. Entitlement, right? Because entitlement and arrogance is an expectation. Because I perceive myself as exceptional, the normal boundaries shouldn't apply to me. I don't have to follow the rules. Everybody else has to follow the rules. I don't have to do what other people do because I'm me. Someone else's no becomes an instant insult instead of just information. Okay, they said no. That's information to me where their boundary is or what their capability is. We've talked a lot about encountering people who interpret kindness as access. And the moment that access is withdrawn, their behavior changes. Well, that's an entitlement because gratitude always says, thank you for what you gave me. And entitlement says, why aren't you giving me more? These are two very different narratives. And with those two very different narratives comes a very different frequency. And we've talked many times on this show about energy, frequency, and vibration. And the idea that if we want to elevate out of this fear programming and violence and competition, comparison, envy, jealousy, etc., we have to change our narrative. And not just collectively, because collectively is the big one. If we have 144,000 souls all meditating on this one beautiful narrative of love, peace, elevation, kindness, empathy, compassion, then we can elevate out of this paradigm. But if we are each singularly holding narratives of I am better than you, I deserve more than you, I am ... then we are a lot farther than the collective we. We won't be able to heal. And the idea that when one heals, we all heal, that's absolutely true. It's the ripple effect. So we have to take a good look at arrogance, entitlement. And another one is bossiness. Bossiness and control is another manifestation. A confident leader can say, what do you think? And an arrogant leader struggles with that question because somebody else who answers that question well could challenge their authority. So they micromanage them, they correct them, interrupt them, dominate conversations, dismiss expertise, and goddamn, the worst of all, take credit. Take credit for somebody else's thought. They cleverly twist it and make it look like they're the savior. They came in at the last minute and oh my goodness, if it wasn't for them, this whole thing would have fallen apart. Meanwhile, they had absolutely nothing to do with the inception of this project. They dismissed it. They walked away. They weren't available. They were too busy. But then when the golden hour comes and, it's time to get their flowers, they want to take your flowers and say that those flowers are theirs. So what can look like enormous self-confidence is actually an inability to tolerate not being in control, which also leads us to my favorite one, superiority. Now, superiority is dangerous because it requires comparison. You can't be superior in isolation. You need someone or something to be beneath you, which means that your sense of self is still dependent on somebody else's lack of self, right? So if you actually break it down, it's like, if I need you beneath me in order to feel above, then you've become responsible for maintaining my self-worth. Think about that. If I need you to be beneath me in order for me to feel above, you have become responsible for maintaining my self-worth. And that's where this stuff becomes dangerous. And that's a relationship. A superiority is a relationship. When you see people who are arrogant in this way and they use superiority, it is because they are judging their self-worth on their ability to keep you down. They maintain their high-level status in their minds by keeping you down. That is what a superiority complex essentially does. I could keep myself up as long as I can keep you down. And you will see this play out in relationships and friendships and family dynamics everywhere. There is always that person that is trying to be better than other people and act above so everyone around them is beneath them. My best friend went to Notre Dame and Duke Law. She's highly educated. She came out of school and she went right into Simpson Thacher, where she was a partner. And I mean, incredible. This woman is unreal when it comes to education. And I was the opposite. I mean, shit, I went to New York Film Academy, film school. I went to community college for a couple of years when I was young. I decided, forget the whole education system, and I wanted to go be a ballroom dancer. And I got into the workforce relatively early, learned a skill. I was an actor. I was on stage. I was the absolute antithesis of everything this person was. And I had a relative say to me once, well, why would you be her best friend? That doesn't make sense. And it got to me. And I thought, I should ask this question. Why? And I remember sitting with her one day and I told her what this said relative said. And she absolutely couldn't stand this person in my family who went to a much lesser college than she did. And she said, education has nothing to do with intelligence. And I was floored. She said, I have been around the most on paper intelligent people you have ever met, okay, who are absolutely ignorant, who absolutely know nothing. She said, the reason I'm friends with you is because I feel like you and I are on the same level. We match intelligence, we match intuition, and, we match in our values, the things that we actually care about in life. This has been my friend for decades. This is not somebody that was passing through. And the reason I bring up this story is to say that there are many people who are highly educated who see themselves as above others. And there are many that are, really successful in different ways that see themselves as above others. There are people who got lucky. They had familial money, and yet they think that they are above others. So this above others attitude goes deep into our psyche, and then it does something that nobody expects, and it sabotages success. So let's get into why arrogance sabotages success and why we need to start calling cut and really stepping into our power. The reason arrogance sabotages your success is because it makes you unteachable. And the moment you become unteachable, your evolution stalls out, right? A successful person who thinks they know everything stops listening to other people. A leader who believes they're always right loses good people. The artist who cannot tolerate criticism stops improving. And I could tell you this as an artist, if you cannot take criticism, and especially writers, screenwriters, learn how to kill your little darlings. If you can't learn how to do that, friends, you will become stagnant. And the entrepreneur who thinks that rules don't apply to them eventually make an unavoidable mistake. And then take, of course, relationships. A person who treats relationships transactionally eventually discovers that people have stopped answering their calls. Yes, arrogance can sometimes get people into powerful rooms, but humility is what allows them to stay there. I will say this again. Arrogance can get you into powerful rooms. Arrogance can open doors, but humility is what will allow you to stay there. People are not going to deal with your crap. They're just not. After a while, people will start to back out of wanting to be around you, back out of wanting to work with you. They're not going to do a lot of it to your face, right? Because they don't want to deal with the fallout or the wrath. Instead, they're going to do it behind your back. And here is where we say, let's call cut on arrogance and step into humility. Now, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. Like I feel like so many people think that humility means, cowering into this really, weakened state. No, it's accepting yourself so incredibly and so fully that you don't need to make yourself larger than life anymore. You already know who you are. You have achieved that level of self-love, real self-love. You know what you bring to the table. You don't need to come with your own set of lights. You can be corrected without losing your mind. You can meet somebody more accomplished without feeling that you're less than. You can say, I don't know. And oh, dear Lord, you can apologize. You can listen. And most importantly, you can let somebody else shine. That is what confidence is. The next time you feel yourself needing to correct someone, dominate the conversation, prove your importance, name drop, dismiss advice, demand special treatment, or establish right away that you know more, call cut. Take the sacred pause. Ask yourself, what am I trying to prove right now? Then ask yourself, who would I be if I didn't have to prove this? And that's how you start to alchemize that energy, right? Because we're not necessarily attacking these arrogant thoughts and storylines. We're just investigating what's underneath them. We're taking a peek and we're peeling behind the layer and saying, well, maybe it's insecurity. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's conditioning. Maybe we've confused authority with dominance. Maybe success has taught you that being important means being accommodated. Whatever it is, you don't have to shame what you find under there. You just have to call cut and agree that you're not going to let it direct your next scene. You have to put down that armor. Listen, ask the question, admit what you don't know, let somebody else be brilliant. It doesn't take anything away from you. There are plenty of stars in the sky, and one isn't trying to snuff out the other to be seen. They all just shine. When you come to this realization, you're going to discover something that arrogance will never let you experience. And that is, we're all bigger together. You're going to start to see doors open. You're going to start to see people really align with you. You're going to start to see help coming from the most unexpected places. You're going to start to see people that you never imagined offering you opportunity, offering you a position, offering you a place, simply because you have humbled yourself. You have done the work. You have gone in and changed those narratives of self-limiting belief, and you have put it into true self-love, true self-appreciation and empowerment, not coming from a place of diminishing another person, but of truly admiring your own worth. Remember that arrogance says, I need to be the most important person in the room, and confidence says, I know who I am regardless of the room. One requires constant validation, and the other walks in already whole. So the next time you're feeling yourself reaching for superiority, call cut. Remember, you don't need to stand above anyone else to stand fully in your light. You only have to have the courage to keep shining. Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angélique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.